Dawn lifts over the Chupong Massif on the 14th of November 1965, and the clearing that would be called LZ X-ray tastes of laterite dust and aviation fuel. Specialist Mike Carver, radio man, 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, thumbs a 20-round magazine of 5.56 by 45 into his M16E1 and feels the spring fight back. Across the tree line, Lieutenant Bao of the PAVN 66th Regiment checks the lacquered wood of a Type 56 and murmurs that the Americans have brought plastic toys. The air is warm already, cicadas ticking like primers. Somewhere to the east, a door gunner tests his feed tray. Brass lands in the elephant grass like small, bright beetles. Carver kneels by his platoon leader and sketches sectors with a grease pencil on a map case. The fire direction center grid is already taped under the handset. 8 digits, a lifeline. One radio call can pull a battery of 105S onto the edge of the world. If the canopy takes it, fuse VT for airburst. If they want splinters, quick against the trees. Fact: the M16 is rated for a cyclic 700 to 900 rounds per minute, muzzle near 3,000 feet per second, its recoil a shove more than a kick. Fact: the AK on the other side shoves a 7.62 by 39 at roughly 2,300 to 2,400 feet per second, cycles around 600 to 650, and thumps the shoulder into the stock. Bao waves his scouts forward with 2 fingers and a whisper of "Gan," closer. His men have rehearsed this. Fix the perimeter with fire. Test the artillery's speed, close before the ring hardens. Carver, who would have traded sleep for one more water can, counts his magazines and reminds himself not to ride the trigger. Sweat finds the salt cuts on his knuckles. The smell of sap and hot oil hangs low under the rotor wash. A Huey's silhouette ghosts behind the trees and is gone. A rustle, a single snapped twig, the jungle holding its breath. Alpha Company off to the left pops a few rounds to clear a lane, and the reports sound tight, high, almost flat, the kind of sound that makes a man think the gun is faster than eyes can count. Carver keys the handset, gives his grid, and marks the wind's direction with a pinch of dust that lifts and vanishes. History will say the battle starts now. In the moment, all that exists is a clearing, a doubt, and 2 rifles with very different voices drawing air into the same set of lungs. The first contact is a thread pulled through cloth. Carver's squad sees muzzle flash and the XM16E1S answer in crisp 3-round stitches, the higher pitch cutting through the AK's deeper bark. He hears himself call, "Shot over." The FDC replies, "Shot out." A beat later, "Splash over." He mouths, "Splash out," as the first 105s rip the tree line into splinters. Fragments hiss. Leaves fall in a paper storm that smells of sap and hot steel. What Bao reads as arrogance is doctrine married to logistics. The Americans fire short, controllable bursts because the weapon allows it, and because a UH-1 will be back on the cycle with more 5.56 before the fear of running dry can take root. The AKs answer in volleys, heavy and brave, but muzzle climb steals seconds. Men schooled on wood and iron heft fight the rifle as much as the target. Carver feels the M16's recoil as a quick push, sights wandering less than a width of bark, and promises himself he won't spray when a stitch will do. He keeps the handset cradled. Adjust fire, drop 50, left 10. A DSHK rakes the clearing. An M60 talks back in a steady belt-loud monologue. Mortars, 81S, begin to walk a box. Somewhere a platoon sergeant curses about interlocking sectors, and someone else repeats, "Keep it short, keep it flat," meaning the bursts. Carver would later remember the sound more than the sight. The M16's cadence seeming almost doubled not by stopwatch but by physics. Lighter impulse, faster return to sight, and a report that lives in the upper register where urgency lives. A Huey slides in under the smoke, skids kissing red dust. Crates thump out. 5.56, 7.6 two belts, water, litters. The crew chief points with 2 fingers, move, and the bird is airborne again, rotors chopping the humid air into hard measures. To the north, bow signals a rush to cut the distance, to hug the Americans so closely that artillery becomes a threat to the men it serves. He would have briefed his NCOS that the only safe place is inside the blast fan. Loop time for the resupply run would sit at 15 to 20 minutes, depending on heat and distance. Carver hears the FO say, "Danger close," and the company tightens inward by instinct. He checks his magazine, still more than half, and breathes once, shallow, because breathing deeper tastes like metal. The second salvo is already in the air when he understands the fear is changing shape from scarcity to timing. Time jumps backward on a calendar that smells of machine oil. Detroit, 1966 to 1968. Captain Ruth Alvarez walks the floor at GM Hydromatic, where transmission lines are being taught to berth receivers. She reads the field memos that would have kept her awake. Extraction failures in unchromed chambers, ball powder fouling, units short of cleaning kits, and writes in the margin, "Plate it, standardize it, train it." In the proof cell, a barrel barks. On a clipboard, a signature fixes blame into process, not rumor. The fixes look unheroic and prove decisive. Chrome chambers and bores to fight corrosion and stuck cases, powder specifications harmonized so pressure curves behave, cleaning kits issued with doctrine so privates know why the rod rides the ruck, gauges measure microns, inspectors ink stamp parts with an oath, torque wrenches click like metronomes over aluminum forgings. By late 1967, chrome lining is directed into the pipeline. By 1968, second source capacity is real. Initial awards of roughly 240,000 rifles each to GM Hydromatic and Harrington and Richardson. The following year, GM receives approximately 229,000 more, turning receipts into reliability at national scale. Here is the impossible statistic that democracy makes routine. One American fiscal year can place rifle orders approaching the total small arms inventory of entire opposing armies, and a single well-run line can turn out a receiver every few dozen seconds while holding tolerances a machinist would call beautiful. In one shift, the plant would ship more rifles than a Porter column could carry in a week. In 1 week, acceptance lots would outnumber what a regiment might realistically move down jungle trails in a month. The math is not chest-thumping. It is logistics, spoken plainly. Alvarez does not speak like a poet, but she would have understood that a cyclic rate is a supply chain wearing steel. She stands in a break room that smells of coffee and solvent and tells foremen why chrome matters in monsoon mud. They nod. They have sons. Pallets thump. NSN labels whisper bureaucratic spells. An old hand wipes layout dye from his fingers and says he hasn't missed a day since Saipan. Somewhere, a young inspector practices saying rejected like a promise kept. A crate bound for Pleiku slams shut. It will ride a truck, a rail car, a ship, a C-130, a Huey, and finally a private's shoulder. When it opens, someone like Carver will squeeze the trigger and discover that reliability, too, has a sound. Bao receives the order in a palm-smeared note ferried through smoke and splinters. Nam that lung jich ma jan. Grab the enemy by the belt and strike. Midday heat turns the elephant grass brittle. The clearing at LZ X-ray shimmers. He knows the math. Stay outside the artillery ring and the Americans will comb the trees with shrapnel. Slip inside it and you make their gunners pause. He signals his squad leaders, 2 fingers to the eyes, then down, close. The wood stocks of Type 56 bump against canteens as men crawl. A runner kisses a charm and vanishes into shade. Carver hears the forward observer ask for airburst and imagines steel descending through green light. The M60 rakes lanes. The M16 stitches short bursts that sound to Bao's ear disconcertingly fast, higher in pitch than the chesty AK. Carver keeps his own bursts at 3 to 5, sights settling almost where they started, and calls a correction, drop 50, right 10. Shot, over. The Fire Direction Center says, shot, out, and he braces for splash. They come low, as ordered, and the fight compresses. Danger close doctrine lives in numbers taped to a radio handset, tables for 105s that would make a lieutenant's stomach tighten. Carver's platoon tightens the perimeter, sectors interlock. An M79 thumps, and a grenade blooms under a tangle of bamboo. A DSHK clatters from the timberline. Someone shouts for smoke. The Huey on the loop hovers just enough to dump water cans and bandoliers. 2 crewmen haul a litter aboard and kick out more 5.56. Whole minutes begin to run on a metronome of rotors and reports. Bao's wedge eats distance, brave and doomed in equal measure. He feels the AK's recoil push him off line and bites down to keep volleys level. The American cadence refuses to slacken because it is controllable, because the magazines keep coming, because somewhere a woman in Detroit wrote, "Played it," and the rifle obeyed. Carver tastes metal from the dust, then sweetness, gum from a ration tin, as if to remind him that abundance has flavors. He marks another grid, wonders if drift will steal the fragments from the treetops, and checks his compass against habit. When the shells land short, the world erases and redraws itself. The next order will decide whether the circle tightens or breaks. He cups the handset as if it were a throat he must protect, and says evenly, "Repeat, fire for effect." From a slow orbit above the valley, the forward air controller draws boxes on his kneeboard while the ridge lines blur into a single dark seam. Carver hears him on the net, calm as a metronome, trading 9 lines with fighters stacked in the sun. Down in the clearing, the day is made of fragments, expended links, splinters, black pollen of burnt propellant, yet the pattern holds. The battalion guns fire 3 to 6 rounds per minute per tube when calls stack. The M16s answer with brief, bright stitches that seem to double the tempo of the fight. Bao's second push slides toward the southern sector and meets interlocking fire like teeth. Every lane has an owner. Every owner knows his sector by heart. A machine gun lays a beaten zone long and narrow. A grenadier folds a corner with a thunk and a pop. "Send smoke," the platoon sergeant says, and purple spills into heat. The FAC marks with white, then calls a pair down the chute. Carver does not look up. He keeps the handset tight, hears the FO mutter fuse changes, and feels the clockwork of a system larger than any one man. On the loop, a Huey skims the trees, From touchdown to liftoff, the crew works in practiced silence, tossing water, ammo, litters. 15 to 20 minutes on the cycle, depending on distance and heat, and fear changes shape. Not running dry, but failing to be ready when abundance arrives. On the far side of the trees, men with porters and coil spring traps carry 2 mortar rounds to a man, counting steps in the dusk. Bao watches a runner stumble. The crate is too heavy. By a truth no order can relighten. He tastes the metallic edge of his breath and orders one more rush, not because courage is blind, but because courage has never argued logistics into surrender. The Americans keep their bursts short. The rifles return to sight quickly. The higher pitch of the report lives in the skull, where decisions are made. The FAC releases another pair, and the ground takes a breath it cannot hold. Carver feels pressure in his ears and then hears only domestic noises of a platoon, canteen caps, a torn bandage wrapper, a private whispering a prayer. The wind turns. Smoke folds back on the clearing and carries with it the smell of something sweet. Downstream, a woman and 2 children follow a narrow path toward water. Hulian leads her children along a stream that threads the foothills, water the color of tea from leaf rot and red soil. She teaches them where to place their feet, on stones that do not wobble, under branches that will not catch a hidden wire, and carries a spoon bent from a sea ration lid. The ground near the clearing is slick with churned clay. Brass gleams in the elephant grass like beetle backs. A torn dressing flutters from a thorn. From the trees comes the clean chemical smell of smoke and the sour of sap. A helicopter, belly bright, passes low and is gone, leaving a taste of oil on the air. At the stream bend, she meets a young American medic who would have been told to say "Sin Chow," and does, awkwardly. He crouches and presses a chocolate bar into her son's palm, sweetness that softens even in the shade. Later on the trail, she steps aside for a porter whose shoulders are wrapped against the straps. He carries a crate stenciled for mortars, breathing with a small wounded sound. He does not look up. Far away the guns continue, steady and practiced. She has learned to count between thunder and echo the way her mother counted between lightning and thunder. In a single day of a major operation, Attleboro, Pegasus, American artillery would have thrown more rounds than a regiment here could carry in a month on human backs. She does not know the numbers, only the fatigue in the porter's gait and the way helicopters arrive heavy with answers. A cargo net swinging under a rotor disc is its own language. Rice, water, 5.56 cartridges, 7.62 belts coiling like snakes. The men who come from the mountains carry what they can. The men who come from the sky carry what they choose. Her village counts time in harvests and absences. The Americans measure it in lift cycles, in minutes between shot over and splash out. Both kinds of time fall on the same house roofs. She tucks the chocolate into her son's shirt and tells him to save it. On a ridge above the stream, Bao's platoon forms for one more rush because orders are orders, because honor keeps pace with arithmetic as long as breath allows. Below, Carver changes a radio battery and looks toward the water without seeing it. The valley's ledger is written in the smell of metal, the feel of fabric, and a sweetness melting in a child's hand. Night drapes the central highlands like a tarp pulled tight. After the first day's fury, companies picket LZ X-ray and whisper the arithmetic of survival, sectors, passwords, angles of fire. By late morning, the column toward LZ Albany snakes single file through elephant grass that looks harmless until it isn't. Carver keeps the handset tucked and the whip antenna low. The map case sticks to his forearm. When the ambush blossoms, it feels less like surprise than the jungle remembering an old habit. Fire stitches from both sides of the trail. Men dive for termite mounds that are never quite tall enough. This is the schooling no one asks for. Strangers 3 weeks ago discover the pace at which they can reload and still think. The difference between a stitch and a spray is the difference between seeing and only wanting to. Carver rides the M16E1's light recoil so his eyes stay on the lane while his hands do the work they were taught. Bow, working a flank by feel and habit, spends seconds like a miser spends coins, buying distance with feints, vanishing before artillery can take hold, then returning like a shadow to tap the perimeter again. He counts magazines the way a farmer counts rain clouds and knows exactly when courage begins to borrow against tomorrow. After-action notes get written in pencil and sweat. Perimeter discipline, tighten, interlocking sectors, enforce, danger close, rehearse until the numbers live in the hands. The cadence of the M16 remains the same, but the way it is heard changes. The ear begins to sort the fight into instruments, M60 bassline, burst stitch treble, the mortar's round drum, and the platoon learns to play as an orchestra instead of a crowd. Medics work in the crouch of men who refuse to make themselves larger than the ground. Runners trade words like parts, shift, lift, repeat. What can be said without trespass? American losses across the Ia Drang campaign are counted in the hundreds. Enemy losses are claimed higher by U.S. reports and admitted lower by PAVN accounts. Both ledgers smell the same. What alters is doctrine. Keep the fight compact, keep the net of fires intact, and never let the enemy live outside your artillery's thought. Evening brings a chill that surprises bones in the tropics. Carver touches the handset to feel the voice inside it and waits for morning's work. Some lessons arrive signed in blood. A whistle shrills over a concrete floor in Michigan, and the day begins with solvent and coffee. Alvarez walks past racks of forgings into light that flashes off gauges. Machinists lift parts with a care that looks like affection. The memos from Vietnam have been answered with process, and process has teeth. Chambers and bores are chrome-lined so monsoon mud won't seize brass. Propellant specifications are standardized so pressure behaves across lots. Cleaning kits ride in rucksacks with instructions clear enough to live in muscle memory. In the proof cell, a barrel barks, and the echo lands like paperwork completed. Numbers acquire their own music. In 1968, contracts place roughly 240,000 M16A1s with GM Hydra-Matic and another 240,000 with Harrington and Richardson. The following year, GM receives about 229,000 more. Each serial will find shoulders and stories. A line that once birthed transmissions now times itself in receivers per minute, and the difference between scrap and service turns on microns. Inspectors ink stamp parts with an oath. Foremen hang charts that measure defects in decimals that feel like victories. Torque wrenches click like metronomes over aluminum forgings, while a clerk learns to love the elegance of an NSN. Culture shifts with the fixtures. Armorers' courses multiply. Training circulars turn rumor into rule. Depot stocks of rods, brushes, and lubricant become as decisive as any airstrike when the rain finds a foxhole. Alvarez pins a photograph above her desk, a kid with a handset and grime-streaked cheekbones, and beneath it a note, "Plate it, standardize it, teach it." She signs off a lot and thinks of him in the same breath, the way a mother might check a latch twice. On the loading dock, a forklift driver with a union pin rides the Tyne like a man ferrying lives, not crates. Impossible is a word the plant forgets by lunchtime. A single shift's output equals what a porter column could move in a week of hard trail. A week's receivers outnumber what an isolated regiment might reasonably feed with ammunition in a month. None of this insults the enemy. It describes democracy at work, thousands of hands voting with skill. When a pallet thumps toward the truck bay, labels whisper their catalog spells. The crate rides truck to rail to ship to aircraft to Huey, and at the end of that journey a private opens it to find not a miracle, but a promise kept. The hills around Khe Sanh keep their own calendar, fog that arrives on cue, red dirt that climbs into lungs, nights that ring without going. Carver, rotated north, feels the ground tremble in steady pulses as Operation Niagara lays a crown of steel around the base. The days are measured in pressure and totals. Artillery counts rise into 6 figures. The radio watch learns to hear tones the way musicians hear key changes. Bao, now advising, teaches sappers to move at night and whisper past sensors. He does arithmetic with distances small enough to live in a breath. Here the scale becomes its own species of weather. Bomb lines ripple miles deep. Stacked flights hold like cords in the sun, and the FAC's pencil grinds to a nub. On some days the tonnage dropped would outmass the hills themselves. Across the months of rolling thunder, the United States would deliver roughly 864,000 tons on the north, often noted as more than American forces dropped in the entire Pacific theater of World War II. Around Khe Sanh alone, Niagara would lay down on the order of 100,000 tons of bombs and pour roughly 158,000 artillery rounds into the ring. Elsewhere, in 2 weeks of Pegasus, American guns hurled something like 150,000 rounds, and Attleboro saw more than 14,000 in a day. The trail answers with endurance. Porters step and step, 2 mortar rounds to a man. Trucks creep under camouflage and prayer. A ton crawls south over weeks while a sortie moves it in minutes. This is the statistic that scrapes belief. An air wing can shift in an hour what a regiment of carriers might struggle to move in a month, and it can do so again tomorrow and the day after until calendars learn humility. The rifles below, M16s now fed by reliable magazines and good doctrine, become the fingertips of that skyborne hand, precise at ranges where older habits wasted motion. Carver writes home about cordite and coffee and how the ground sometimes lifts like a breathing thing. Bao writes doctrine that admits the net cannot be broken in the open, only slipped in the dark. Between them, the valley listens. At dusk, the fog comes in low and the world softens, but the numbers remain hard. The sky has a weight, and it sits where it is told. Tomorrow the totals will start higher, and nobody will be surprised. Chalk dust hangs in a classroom at the infantry school, late 1968, where a captain circles 2 words on the board, contact drills, and maps a ring of guns around a landing zone as if drawing a rosary. Ia Drang has been studied, argued, and distilled. The takeaway is not romance, but geometry. Keep the fight compact, keep fires responsive, keep lift on schedule. On another continent, the same lesson is written in Vietnamese. Hug them, strike late, cut wire, disappear before the sky can think. Bao teaches sappers to move by feel, to count their breath between listening halts, to put a charge where an American hand will reflexively go in the dark. The Americans answer with routine so ingrained it becomes a reflex of its own, perimeter discipline enforced by gravel-voiced sergeants, interlocking sectors rehearsed until men can draw them with their eyes closed, danger-closed tables taped under radio handsets where sweat cannot smudge them away. In motor pools and revetments, the machinery of doctrine turns. Crew chiefs brief skid loads, pilots time their orbits, fire direction centers pre-compute likely targets and hold the math at a simmer. A company SOP advises burst control, magazine rotation, barrel cooling. An armorer checks extractor springs and leaves a dot of paint like a blessing. The M16's voice has become familiar, higher, flatter, quick to settle, and its reliability, once distrusted, now lives where it counts, in expectations. Carver, pulled to a training cadre for a month, teaches privates to keep their stitches short and their ears open for what the platoon is saying without words. He adds one lesson he cannot prove but believes. Logistics is a weapon you carry on your back as surely as steel. Bao stands over a sand table and traces a line straight into a notional perimeter, knowing the instruction flips pride on its back, close with them because nothing else survives their net. He does not insult his men with lies. Courage is still the demand. Arithmetic is still the judge. The change is that both armies admit it. One writes it into binders, the other into whispers and night signals. The myth of twice as fast narrows to a truth both sides recognize. The gun that feels quicker inside a system that never runs dry is a doctrine, not a boast. Evening falls on the classroom and the sand table alike, and the diagrams look briefly like constellations. On an armorer's bench, two rifles rest side by side like arguments paused for breath. A stopwatch sits within reach and remains mostly theater. Carver, back from the field long enough to remember what quiet sounds like, runs a fingertip along a receiver. He trusts now without superstition. Mechanical facts do not waver. The M16 family cycles roughly 700 to 900 rounds per minute and drives a 5.56 by 45 cartridge near 3,000 feet per second. The AK/AKM family turns at about 600 to 650 and throws a 7.62 by 39 nearer 2,300 to 2,400. The numbers say faster, not double. The ear in contact insists on something else. The higher register report, the quick recoil pulse that lets sight snap home, the way a short burst sands down the hesitation between decisions. Alvarez could open a ledger and let the columns talk. By 1968, second source contracts place roughly 240,000 M16A1s apiece at GM Hydromatic and Harrington and Richardson, with about 229,000 more to GM the following year. Lot acceptance tests become a civic ritual. Chrome-lined chambers convert humidity into a nuisance instead of a verdict. Training circulars turn rumor into rule. Keep it clean, keep it lubed, keep bursts tight. The myth that once hurt the rifle, that it was a plastic toy, wilts under the unromantic weight of things that work. Bao's measure is practical. He knows the AK will run with its own stubborn grace in mud a quartermaster would not drink. He also knows that volley fire, admirable as it looks, spends seconds that the recoil insists on taxing. His answer has never changed. Erase distance, arrive where artillery hesitates, make the fight a whisper from muzzle to face. He would tell a young leader that what feels like twice as fast cannot be outrun but can be stepped inside, like weather. In the platoon CP, Carver times a lift cycle rather than a cyclic rate and finds his faith there. 15 to 20 minutes between inbound birds means the magazine in his well is never the last one. Artillery on the push call means the lane in front of him exists inside a geometry right-sized to his fear. He does not quote numbers when he teaches. He taps a receiver and says, "Short and flat, and listen." The stopwatch stays where it is. The ear keeps the true time. When the rains return, the clearing at Ia Drang looks almost ordinary. Grass reclaiming foxholes, a termite mound polished by hands, sunlight strobing through new leaves. Helien plants cassava in the rim of an old crater because it holds water, and Carver, years later, will stand at the edge of a lawn stateside and smell cut grass and, briefly, hot oil. Bao walks a memorial stone and touches names as if they were stitches closing a wound that will never seal. Alvarez locks her office for the last time and leaves a note in the file. Closed, chrome, powder, training. Knowing that a promise kept has no parade. Facts do not soften with distance. The rifle that once inspired derision as a toy proved itself within a system designed to keep speed honest. Contracts in a single year approached 500,000 rifles, capacity that would have exceeded, in weeks, what enemy logistics could move down jungle trails in months. Around Khe Sanh, an operation could drop on the order of 100,000 tons of bombs, while throwing roughly 158,000 artillery rounds into a ring. An hour's airlift moving what a Porter battalion might labor a month to shift by foot. The impossible becomes the everyday when a free nation decides to make it so. But the closing wait is human. The cadence that felt twice as fast to men hearing it for the first time is no longer a boast. It is a memory of control when chaos tried to widen. The numbers do not erase the names, they carry them. American abundance had flavors, water cans, chocolate, spare parts that left marks as sure as craters. Scarcity had its own dignity, shoulders wrapped against straps, rice pucks saved against hunger. But arithmetic, finally, took its tithe. The doctrine that bent became an inheritance taught in classrooms and at range towers. Keep it compact, keep it responsive, keep faith with the lift and the net. At dusk, the valley exudes that smell veterans name without words: wet earth, old propellant, sap. If you are very still, you can hear both rifles again, the lower drum of the AK from the trees, and over it the M16's higher stitch, the sound of a nation that learned to mass-produce speed and of citizen soldiers who carried it until the valley exhaled.